Okay, hi everybody. Sorry about that interruption. So we're back. And maybe an advantage to this would be that I'll be able to do this demo and edit out some of the periods where I am talking or where I'm blocking in like certain areas that just take me a long time. I'll edit those out this time. And I think possibly I figured out the overheating. I was using a charging case with my phone, which is a very thick case. I think that may have been causing the overheating. Where now I've taken the case off, fully charged phone, and hopefully that does the trick. Okay, so to get back to where we are, we're making a warm-cool painting. So we're carefully observing a simple still life, in this case a piece of fruit, set up under a raking light source. I started the drawing. I talked about why I started the drawing the way I did, with this straight line or tight arc contour. I talked about how that helps set up a sense of the planes of the object moving through space. I blocked in the cast shadow, and I can now move on to tracing out the shadow pattern. So again, this is a warm, cool painting. We're using white, black, which is our cool color, transparent with an oxide, which is our warm color. So I'm going to go back into my drawing color, and I will, after having talked about the reason I started the contour the way I did, I want to show people I can start to slowly refine the contour closer to something like an organic. Start to hit the air in a more organic way. So basically what I'm doing is I'm adding more and more lines to the contour. I'm rounding out the high points, which read as contours, starting to bring that closer and closer to a contour that seems to be closing an organic as opposed to a geometric form. Okay, so now I'm going to look carefully at my object and find the shadows. So in the objects we've drawn so far, so we do a cone, and then we did our imaginary drawing of an 8-sided column this morning on real light source. On those objects, there's a fairly clear and there's a clearly discernible straight shadow pattern because of the nature of those geometric forms we're using. You'll notice on this pair, the shadow pattern is far less regular and more complicated. So it's an irregular shadow pattern. And shadow patterns on organic forms can be harder to read exactly what they're doing. But if you look at the reference image, you'll notice that on the right-hand side of this pair, there's an irregular shadow pattern that, again, just like on the cone we painted or just like on the imaginary column we painted this morning, this shadow pattern shows us where the planes of the object turn away from the light source. So that's what the shadow pattern is to us. So anything to the right of this shadow pattern are planes that have turned away from the source of the light. The source of the light, again, our light is coming from above, the left. So the planes on the right-hand side of the form that are moving backwards in space that way are turned away from the light source, so we're not receiving any direct light. Going with a little bit of thinner and just clean up my lines. So notice that I'm making sure to, as I'm making the object more and more organic, I'm making sure to hold on to the angle and the tilt of the contours so that that contour still tells me the direction that the planes of the object are moving through space. So as I add more and more information and detail to the contour, I still want the contour from here to read as moving that way in space, so moving backwards to the left. And then at this high point on the contour, I want that contour to communicate to me that the form of the object moves backwards to the right, towards the back wall of the box we're using F7. As I'm drawing, I'm constantly conscious of that. I want to make sure that every element in my drawing reinforces the sense of volume, the sense of three-dimensional volume sitting in a believable perspectival space. So I am more and more carefully resolving the contour so that I'm getting something that reads a more organic form. I'm making sure those contours still clearly reveal to me planes. They clearly reveal planes moving in specific directions in space. So this shadow mass, this shadow shape that I've traced out again, I hope you can see it in the reference image I sent to everybody. This shadow plane, I want to read as clearly moving backwards like this. And then the other planes of the object are moving in a variety of directions relative to the light source. So if you look at if we think about the object we're going to paint today, just in terms of the kind of simplified planar structure, I think you'll see again, referring to the reference image I sent you, I think you can see that we could start to discern a series of planes. Now these are irregular planes. They're not going to have regular shapes the same way the eight-sided column had in that the imagination painted it this way. But we can discern a series of planes, each plane having a different value on this object. Some of those planes are easier to see, some of those are a little bit more difficult to see. It may be difficult to make out some of those planes in your reproduction. In the image I sent to you, you can start to trace out the planes of this object. And so this is a very good example of an object being constructed of a series of planes that are not regular, so they turn slowly into one. So the planes don't have abrupt corners. then they slowly turn into one. And pieces of fruit, especially certain kinds of fruit, like this Asian pear, give you a really clear sense of that plane of structure. So this plane here on the left is a plane that is facing the light source. This plane is facing the light source. You'll notice this plane here starts to turn away. These planes turn away even more, so those go into a kind of half tone, and then we get to the shadow tone. So now I'm going to start blocking the painting just as I did yesterday, and I will hopefully I'll be able to edit out some of the work I'd be blocking it in. Okay, so what we're doing, again, we have a very limited palette. White, black is a cool color, transparent oxide is a warm color. A very limited palette. So what we're going to be doing is observing relative temperature. We're going to be using these three colors to record relative temperature. So as I analyze the setup, the first thing I notice is that the warmest color in my setup are the light planes of the Asian. So those are going to get a warm and light color. The back wall of the box is warm, but not quite as warm as the Asian pear. The surface that the pear is sitting on is cool. So it's cool gray blue. So that's going to be a cool value. The temperature of the cast shadow behind the pear is warm. I'm going to start blocking in those colors. So I'm going to start like I did yesterday, blocking in large masses. I'm not going to work on the object itself. I'm just going to be blocking in large masses of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a warm gray for a warm gray, approximately a middle tone. So if we remember, I had the value scale yesterday. So I would say that the value of the back wall of that box is approximately a middle gray. So I'll be mixing up a value that approximates a middle gray value. It's not going to be the exact middle gray, my value scale, but it's going to be somewhere in that range. Somewhere in the range of that value. But this value is a cool color. That's made with white and black. I'm going to make a middle value of a warm value. So I'm using white, black, and with a considerable amount of transparent red oxide to warm that up. Go with a somewhat larger brush to go to a large area. And remember, I'm just looking at the large masses, very large masses of tone. I'm not looking at any details. So the details of the back, of the construction of that box, I'm going to ignore. I'm just looking for the large value relationships. And so we'll see, as I said on the first painting, we'll see once I have more values locked in, whether that value seems accurate. I think it's a decent place to start. I may have to change it. So I'm locking in the paint in such a way that I'm moving the brush in every direction. I'm not moving the brush in one direction. I sometimes see people do that in order to maintain a smooth, even tone. But you want to avoid that. If you put the paint down like this, you end up creating a surface that has the look of a wall that's been painted. And putting the paint down like this, again, in an effort to maintain a smooth surface, what you're doing is you're maintaining the flatness of the picture. You want to put paint down in a way that a little bit more suggests the fact that you're trying to create an atmosphere, trying to create space. I'm going to be moving the paint around in a way that reflects the directions of the planes I'm working on, or can help create a sense of the atmosphere of the set. So while your reference image for this online demo isn't going to give you a clear sense of the color that I'm looking at, to some sense, but not exact sense of the color I'm looking at, you can nevertheless see that I am not trying to match the color. All I'm trying to do is communicate the relative color temperature of what I'm looking at. So the back wall of this setup is a warm value. And I think, I can never tell for sure until I have all the colors locked in. I think it's around that value, and it's around that temperature. Okay. So now I'm going to move on to the surface of the table. So that's a much lighter value, and it is a much colder temperature. So lighter value. So the question is, do I want to leave it, given our limited color range, do I want to leave it as just white mixed with ivory black, or should it be a little bit warmer than that? I think it should be a little bit warmer than that. I think that suggests too cold a color. So I'm going to barely warm that up by putting just a little bit of Venetian red with my black. I think that's going to create a temperature that better reflects the temperature of the tabletop I'm looking at. That's much better. That's now a warm gray.